Dear students, today we are studying about cortical localization of language. Before going to the details, let us briefly discuss what is language in terms of brain function. When we say language, we often think it is English, Malayalam, Tamil, French, etc. etc. But in terms of brain function, language includes several abilities like reading, writing, speaking, and understanding words, and all these functions are assigned to different regions of the cerebral cortex or different cortical areas. Like in the case of different senses like vision, hearing, taste, smell, and touch, language functions are also assigned to different cortical areas. We will be studying about the different cortical areas concerned with language function in this session. First, let us have a glimpse into the history of how the different cortical areas of language were identified. The history of localization of language began in 1864 with the findings of Paul Broca. Paul Broca was a French neurologist. He did the postmortem examination of two patients who had problems with the use of language. Broca noticed that both the patients had a diffuse left hemisphere damage in a small area in the inferior portion of the left prefrontal cortex. In this picture, you see the prefrontal cortex. At the inferior portion of the prefrontal cortex, you can see the damage to the cortical area. Broca proposed that this small area that is located inferior to the left prefrontal cortex is the center for speech production. This area is the anterior speech cortex and it came to be known after the name of Broca as Broca's area. Broca proposed that damage to Broca's area can disrupt speech production of a person. That is, it can damage the ability of a person to speak. The next major event in the study of cerebral localization of language occurred in 1874 when Carl Wernicke found out another cortical area of language. Carl Vernix was a German neurologist. He studied 10 clinical cases and proposed that there is a language area in left temporal lobe just posterior to the primary auditory cortex. Here you can see the temporal lobe. This is the primary auditory cortex located in the temporal lobe, and just posterior to the primary auditory cortex you can see the planum temporale. Do you remember what is planum temporale? In one of the previous classes on cerebral lateralization, we have learned that planum temporale is part of cerebral cortex that is concerned with language function. In all the 10 clinical cases that he studied, Wernicke found that the patients presented with a difficulty in language comprehension. That is, they had difficulty in understanding what is being told to them. He observed that in all these cases, the patients had a damage in the left planum temporale, that is located posterior to the primary auditory cortex. Thus, he came to a conclusion that this posterior speech cortex is the cortical area of language comprehension. Subsequently, this area came to be known as Vernix area. These are the two important studies that led to the discovery of two important cortical areas of language function, that is, Broca's area and Vernix area. In addition to Broca's area and Vernix area, there are other brain areas with language function. The important cortical areas concerned with language and speech are Broca's area, Vernix area, motor cortex, and arcuate fasciculus. As we have seen in the previous slide, Broca's area is the anterior speech cortex and it is located at the lower portion of the left prefrontal cortex. It is associated with grammar and speech production. Look at this picture. This girl is asking Rohan whether he has submitted his assignments. The syntax of the conversation or the grammatical construction of sentence for speech production is done in Broca's area. The program of speech articulation is stored within Broca's area. When we say something, it becomes meaningful or it makes sense only if the words are rightly sequenced. That means the sentence should be grammatically correct. Otherwise, it will not make any sense to the other person. When a sentence is rightly constructed in the Broca's area, then the speech program will activate the adjacent area of the precentral gyrus that controls the facial muscles and also the muscles of the oral cavity. When these muscles work, the sentence that is articulated in the Broca's area is told. That is, the person is speaking. If there is any damage to the Broca's area, then speech production is disrupted or the sentence will not be rightly constructed. Or, in other words, there will be grammatical errors. The speech may not make any sense. The next cortical area of language is the Vernix area. It is the posterior speech cortex and it is located in the left planum temporale in the temporal lobe posterior to the primary auditory cortex. Vernix area is concerned with language comprehension. That means understanding or comprehending the language. Look at this picture again. This girl is asking Rohan whether he has submitted his assignments. What is Rohan's reply? Yeah, I have submitted them last week itself. Did you give yours, Neha? Now I am asking you, was Rohan's reply according to what Neha asked him? Yes, because Rohan was able to understand what Neha asked him or he was able to comprehend. This language comprehension or understanding of language is done by Vernix area. If there is damage to Vernix area, the person may find it difficult to understand what is told to him. When conversation is going on between two people, both language production and comprehension are equally important. That is, the sentences should be rightly constructed and told. Equally important is the ability of the person to understand. Without this, the conversation will not be meaningful. When I am teaching you, you are able to understand what I am telling because of the Vernix area. And I am able to tell meaningful sentences because of the Broca's area. The next cortical area, which is essential for language function, is the motor cortex. It is located in the precentral gyrus. It is concerned with the physical articulation of speech. That is, for a person to speak something, it requires movements of muscles in the face and oral cavity. Motor cortex controls the movements of muscles in the face, jaw, tongue, and larynx. The speech program in the Broca's area activates the motor cortex in the precentral gyrus and the speech is physically produced as voice. The language function of motor cortex was discovered by two neurosurgeons, Penfield and Roberts, in 1959. Another very important brain area which is essential for language function is arcuate fasciculus. We have seen that Broca's area is the area for speech production and Vernix area is the area for speech comprehension. If both these functions are to work well, there should be a connection between these two areas. The connection between the Broca's area and Vernix area is established by the arcuate fasciculus. It is a white matter tract, that is, a bundle of myelinated neurons that connect the Broca's area and Vernix area through temporal, parietal, and frontal lobes. Here you can see the fiber tract shown as red lines connecting Broca's area and Vernix area. When a person is asked something, the language is comprehended in the Vernix area and the information is passed to the Broca's area through arcuate fasciculus. And in the Broca's area, the reply is constructed as a meaningful sentence and the speech program will then activate the motor cortex and the speech is produced as voice. We have now learned about the cortical areas concerned with language function. Thank you.